So this is a rock, and this is also a rock. But there's one big difference between them. One of these can connect to Wi-Fi, and the other one can't. You might be wondering, how can a little rock connect to Wi-Fi? Well, that's because inside this one is a small ESP32, which lets it connect to my network. Not only that, but it can also detect when I touch it. For example, if I triple tap it, it turns off my PC. So today, we're going to build a smart rock. First, I needed to figure out what parts I was going to put inside. I knew I needed some kind of input to control my computer, but instead of using a normal button, I had a cooler idea. What if I can control it with an invisible touch sensor? For that, I chose the TTP223, which detects capacitance between your finger and the sensor. That means you can actually put something between your finger and the sensor, like plastic, and it will still detect the touch. Next, I wanted some kind of feedback so I'd know when it was working. For that, I added a simple LED. Nothing fancy, but it works great, and it gives the rock a little bit of life. And now that I had my parts figured out, I needed some kind of enclosure. Unfortunately, I don't have the tools or the expertise to carve a real rock, but I do have a 3D printer, so I decided to print one instead. I used this pink filament, which actually gives it a bit of an amethyst or gemstone look. Honestly, it doesn't look too bad sitting on my desk. Once the rock finished printing, it was time to add the touch sensor. Before gluing it in, I wanted to make sure the sensor could still detect touches through the PLA plastic. So I grabbed another small project I made earlier and tested it. Luckily, it worked. So, with that in mind, I hot glued the sensor into the top of the rock, right where I wanted the touch area to be. And now came the soldering. I'm using the ESP32, so I connected 3v3, which stands for 3.3 volts, G&D, ground, and D4 to the touch sensor. D4 is the data pin that reads the touch signal. 3.3 volts obviously is power, ground, G&D, and then that's when I wired up the LED. The LED connects to D18 and GND with a 220 ohm resistor to protect it. The resistor limits the current so the LED doesn't burn out. Once those wires were ready, I started them to the touch sensor. This part was not very cinematic. If I recorded it, you'd mostly just see my hands moving around while I tried not to burn myself. But eventually, I got everything connected. And after that, I added a little hot glue over the LED hole. Once the hot glue cools, it becomes slightly opaque, which actually creates a nice diffuse glow. Later, you'll see that it worked surprisingly well. Since the rock was just going to sit on my desk, I didn't bother designing a bottom piece. I just hot glued the ESP32 inside the case. Now, the hardware was finished, and it was time to start coding. Since the ESP32 has Wi-Fi, this made things a lot easier. Instead of sending serial data over USB, it can just send requests over the network. So, I created a simple Node.js server using Express. The idea was to let the rock trigger different actions on my computer. I wanted to be able to type text, open files, run commands, and execute macros. I also built a web dashboard so I could easily change what the rock does without touching the actual code or the files. With the planning done, it was time to start coding. First, I wrote the background server that handles all the actions. Next, I built the web interface that talks to the server. So now, with that being done, I have a simple dashboard where I can edit the config.json and macro.json files without it actually being unuser friendly. I can add new macros and change what each click on the rock does. But there is still one missing piece, the ESP32. Right now the sensor could detect touches, but it wasn't actually sending that data anywhere. So I had to write the firmware for the ESP32. This code detects the single taps, the double taps, and the triple taps. We also detect long holds, and when you hold the rock, the LED even does a little strobe effect, which looks pretty cool. It sends events when the hold starts and ends, which means that you could use it for things like push-to-talk in games. So now it's time to test a smart rock, and it actually works. It really does look futuristic though. The LED glow right here combined with the purple gradient makes it almost look like some weird sci-fi artifact. And the best part is you can't even tell where there's anything inside it. The touch sensor is completely invisible. So yeah, that's my smart rock. Thanks for watching. If you want to check out some of my other projects, they should be on screen right now. Thomas B12, out.